Hey everybody, welcome back. I got Debbie Hunt here with me, the founder of Acts in Action. Debbie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty excited to be back at the farmhouse again. I got the key today, and thank you for Sarah and allowing me this space. It really feels like the Lord's like opening some doors.
Yes.
I was just thinking about the passage of the keys to the kingdom. And I was looking at this little key that she gave me. It's just a little itty bitty key. But it's not about like the strength of the key. It's about the fact that it's perfect for the lock.
Right.
And
That's
so
what the key unlocks.
yeah. And it's like no matter how strong I am, if the key isn't the right key for the lock, it's
Right.
not going to do it. It's just going to break.
That's good.
So
Yeah.
anyways, I just thought it was really neat. I was like holding on to the key the whole drive here, thinking of this new opportunity. I know it can be small, but that's someone who's believing in this. The Lord laid on
Yeah.
their heart to help me. And so it's just neat. It's one of those neat things. Have you had anything like that in Acts in Action yet? Little
Well,
things?
What I wanted to ask you while you were holding the key driving here, were you afraid you were going to like drop it under the seat and then I can't find the key to get in?
It would have been my luck. It would have fell because my van has like the worst like death hole, and it would have just fell. No,
Fell into the abyss of the
it's
car.
just gone. I'm scrounging around for it. No,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
But no, yes, back to your question about Acts in Action. I have really worked hard on making sure that I didn't get ahead of God and letting Him be the one to open the doors, because I think in our flesh, like we want to do all these things, and I just said this today, they may be good things, but are they God things? And I think there's a difference. So, with Acts in Action, it's just been a baby step process, really for the last 3 years, starting with the Lord's working in me with the final surrender to Him, even though I was saved as a young child. So, Acts in Action wouldn't even have come about if I hadn't have taken the full faith step to fully surrender to the Lord in all things. And when I did, it was a snot cry at the altar, a snot cry with Garrett. And in that moment, I just heard the Lord say, now I can use you.
I love how you said you didn't want to get in front of God. John and I were just on here talking about performance, and he said you're made to produce, but you're not meant to perform. And there's been times in my life where I've gotten ahead of God. So it's so important to constantly like be seeking, like, is this the right thing for me, Lord? Like, is this what you want? And I've been very guarded in this and doing this podcast, I love advice, and people can keep on giving me advice. It's not, I'm not afraid of getting the advice, but I am guarded in taking it to the Lord and saying, Lord, is this, even with coming here, right? I was like, yeah, Lord, is this you? Like, and then once I got here, I just felt that like confirmation, like, yes, this is where you need to be.
Yeah.
What is the mission and the vision for Acts in Action?
So the mission for Acts in Action and kind of what we stand for is really to bridge that gap between the church and the confined, whether it be recovery, the incarcerated, just any type of a place where people just, are struggling. I have a heart for the unseen and the forgotten and the cast to the side and those that society deem unimportant and or unproductive. And that's my heart has been there for many years because I felt that for many years, so that's one of the mission is just to bring the gospel to the forgotten. But Acts in Action in itself is about Acts 16:25 through 26, where Paul and Silas, where they were in the innermost part of the prison, and they were shackled and beaten, and, it was dark and wet, and it was just like the lowest of the low were put there, and they were praising and worshiping the Lord, and everybody was listening, and they were doing it so fervently that, the ground shook violently, and the prison doors opened, and it set all the captives free. And I remember having a conversation with Virginia one night after we had went into Ballard County Jail, and I was just like, man, we were talking about Acts 16. I was like, man, we just need to put Acts into action. And it was just like this little bell went off, because, that's really what we want to do.
What's it like to, be in the moment with worshiping with people who are physically incarcerated, but like spiritually they're like feeling this freedom? What's that like?
It's beautiful, and we've been going into Ballard County Jail for about a year now, and now I get to go to church and worship with some of them on the outside. And,
that's awesome.
And look, Ballard County may be a small jail, but it's a jail, it's a prison regardless. So you can't get in and you can't get out.
Right.
But, when you bring them the word and when you bring the worship music, and I think worship music can be that catalyst that just prepares your heart and then just kind of lowers your defenses. And, some women have been saved through the word and the worship, and, they're vulnerable and they're searching, they're looking, they know they've made a wrong decision, but they don't have to live that decision forever. And you don't have to, you may have to suffer an earthly consequence, but you don't have to suffer an eternal consequence. That your situation where you're at right now, even in Lifeline, we go in there, it does not define how good God is. God is still good.
Absolutely. I know partially why this is on your heart, and maybe I could be just reading into things, but what was the driving force that gave you this passion for this ministry?
The driving force that gave me the passion to want to go into not just Lifeline, but just in areas like that really is Garrett. A lot of what Garrett went through and the transformation that the Lord did in his life, and because it completely destroyed our relationship. Thankfully, we serve a God of redemption, and one thing I love to tell the men and the women at Lifeline and even in jail is that I want them to see hope manifested. And going out to Lifeline, it's just I want them to see, not just hear, but I want them to see in the physical and the tangible that you can touch and relate with the redemptive power of Christ.
What's it like to see Garrett fulfill his calling now after all those years of struggle? What's it like to see him so devoted to Christ?
Well, I tell you what, he walks true to what Christ calls us to do and what Christ has called him to do. He walks true to that. He made the statement when he was saved that he will never stop speaking of God's goodness, and he has not, even through the ups and the downs and just everything that life has to throw at you. It's just amazing. He's always had this special ability since he was a child. I can remember pushing him through the mall in a stroller, not even 6 months old, and people be like, "Oh, look, there's Garrett." And I'm like, "How do you know Garrett?" Like, he's literally 6 months old. So I really feel that the Lord has always had an anointing on his life. The Lord gives us all gifts, but they're all different. We have different callings. But I remember when we were coming up with his name, I wanted a name that I knew people would remember. And I feel like that has happened. But it's not in his flesh and his ability. It's all God, because he was in a very long drug addiction, and it was only the power of God and Garrett's surrender to that, because his first surrender was not to God. His first surrender was, I'm going to get clean.
Right.
So, and then when he did, it's a ripple effect. Look, when you have a member of your family that gets saved or then turns their life to the Lord, especially men, it's a ripple effect, and it has affected so many people. It affected me, and I've been walking with the Lord my whole life. It completely just changed the trajectory of my life. So.
He's got a magnetic presence,
Yes.
There's not everyone's got that specific, where people just drawn to him.
Right. He did not get that from me.
But it is a ripple effect. We've seen it in our lives. Jody's mom rededicated her life to Christ, and we got to baptize her. And my nephew was just baptized Sunday. So you do start seeing, once you start walking in with the Lord and fully surrendering it, it affects the people around you.
Yep.
And it's really just awesome to get to see, so many testimonies on here. It's not because of Faith Center, but they start really transforming at Faith Center because they found the right home and they surrendered. They found the right heart too. And so it's just really impactful and awesome to get to hear of what the Lord has been doing in Garrett's life, even before, Faith Center and everything. So you're a very passionate person. You seem like you're very driven.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Were you born with that? Was that from your parents?
I think it's a survival instinct.
Mm-hmm.
My childhood was, if you look at it from the outside in, was your typical middle class family. My mom stayed home. My dad worked. I had a brother. I was raised in church, but, behind the scenes, there was child molestation and there was just, different things like that. So I think that was just something that I learned at a very, very young age. I actually came across my mom has passed away now, and I come across a writing that she wrote in 1975. So I would have almost been 3. And she was writing about me and how sassy I was and strong-willed that I was. So, I could have been born with it, but I also know around that age it could have potentially been just out of survival to just keep pushing forward. I know that the Lord entered my life at a very young age. I just didn't know who it was. And the enemy, the devil, entered my life at a young age. I just didn't know who it was. I knew from a very young age there was a battle for my soul. There was a battle between good and evil. I just didn't have a name for it.
Wow. Whenever you had some of those trials so early on, did you feel like you resented God any?
No, I never even thought about that. I think it's because I had been going to church for so long that it didn't even dawn on me to be mad at God at a young age. At an older age, then there were times in my life that I didn't understand. Why did this happen? Why was I even born? Why? The whole victim mentality. Why are you doing this to me? And I tell you what, it is not God that does that to you.
Were you like a person who buried it?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I was probably close to 30 before I even said anything to my parents.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was it do you mind if I ask if it was a family member or okay?
A couple, yeah. And some of my some friends of the family, yeah.
Your parents didn't even have any idea.
No.
What was their reaction like?
They got mad at me.
Out of hurt.
I think I come from a generation where we didn't face stuff like that. Didn't go to therapy.
Yeah.
Didn't talk about it. Let's just sweep it under the rug. But I remember them getting mad at me.
Wow. That's
and
tough.
the response was, well, what do you want us to do about it? So
it's a lot to process.
Yeah.
Were you married at the time? Had you already found...
I had been married once already to Garrett's dad.
Gotcha.
So.
How did you and Garrett's dad meet?
Oh, Lord.
We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
I've known Garrett's dad since I was 11. So I grew up with him.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And around what age was he out of the picture for Garrett?
Garrett would have been 10 months old. So I would have been 20 and his dad would have been like 23, 24, very young.
Yeah.
Now that I look back, at the time I thought I was grown, but I look back and I see pictures, and I had somebody look at a picture of me and they're like, man, you were just a baby. And I'm like, dang, I was just a baby.
Yeah. 20 is young. It's so crazy how when we're that age, we just feel like we're like on top of the world. Like we got it all figured out. You know, I'm 29 in February. Jody just turned 29, and it's like,
Yeah.
man, like whenever I was 19, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
So did you always have like a spirit-filled relationship with Christ?
Yes. Like I said, he entered my life at a very young age, you know, and I was actually just talking about this today that, you know, I have seen the spiritual realm. You know, I've been in the spiritual realm. The hand of God has physically saved me when I was young, and I just always knew it was there. I've just, I don't know. I just feel like I've just always known. There was never a doubt that God did not exist.
Mm-hmm.
I may not have known it was God, but there were at that young age.
Yeah.
But there was never a doubt in my mind that God didn't exist. That wasn't even never even doubted it, because I knew he existed.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the enemy existed. I knew they both existed.
Right.
So.
Garrett has shared on here about some of the spiritual activity you guys have encountered. How has that shaped you and changed you throughout the years?
Well, when I wasn't living for Christ and I didn't have, you know, you kind of get.
When did this happen?
Which part?
Whenever you so you've been saved basically a lot of your life, but then there was a season where you maybe got out of walking with Christ.
Yes.
When was that?
I would probably say in my late 20s, maybe early 30s.
Mm-hmm. Was it resentment or?
I think it was just out of anger because, look, it's rough being a single parent. It's rough being a broke single parent. It's rough being a single parent dealing with trauma from your childhood. And I think I'd reached a point where I was just like, you know, I would, you know, try to live right. And you can't, you know, there's nothing I can do to earn my salvation. And I kind of gave up. I still knew God existed, but I quit. I quit trying. And I remember when I quit trying. And I tell you what, when you quit trying, you're in a lot of danger.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget laying in my bed, and I could audibly hear demons. And I could visually see them peeking and coming around my door, laughing at me. And in that moment, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And that next morning, I made a shift, you know, and I repented for, you know, just being angry at God. And I'm not saying that I then led this great life and or anything like that, but never again did I deny that he existed. You know, I mean, it's not that I denied that he existed, but never again did I just like, I'm just going to block you out.
Yeah, when you're staring demons in the face and you're hearing them, that's like a totally different experience. I can't even imagine how terrifying that was, because you feel so powerless. Yeah. Because, like, especially if you're not really connected with the Lord at that, how are you supposed to have faith to, like, command them to leave? You know, they're there.
Well, I had somebody come the next day, and we prayed, and we anointed my house. We anointed every window, every door, any crack that could even possibly get in. We anointed everything.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, my buddy Zach, I talk about him on the podcast a little bit. He passed away a couple years ago. He saw visions. He was very spiritual, perceptive. You know, that's what I call it. And he would see demon. Now, I don't know if it was every time, because he liked to stretch the truth, but I trusted him pretty wholeheartedly. I know at least a couple of times there had to be some truth in it, but one, I'll never forget, we were in his, you know, we just slept in the same bed, and we just grew up together. So we're in his little full size, like shoulder to shoulder, and he's telling me there's a demon in the corner and stuff. And, you know, I'm like young, ignorant Dan thinking, you know, let's just pray it away. You know what I mean? And he just had other little encounters like that throughout the years. How did that affect Garrett?
Well, I think at some point, you know, like when Ghost Hunters was real big and all that kind of stuff. I think there was a period in time where that was the cool thing to like see all these spirits and all this kind of stuff, and TV shows everywhere, and you could get apps on your phone and be like, oh, look, there's a spirit over there, and that's dangerous to play. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, I feel like that I bought into the whole, that's your dead uncle in the corner, or something like that. And that's really not true because, when we pass, we're to, be with Christ. Well, you shall be with me in paradise. It doesn't say we're going to stay here and just wander around and not knowing what we're supposed to do in a dead spirit. And that's not true. And over the years, I've learned that, something like that is really demonic is what that is.
Absolutely. If you're not sure, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there, a lot of ideas and stuff. And if you're not sure, you can start thinking of ghosts and like, what is the afterlife? I'm pretty sure as Pastor John, mentioned familiar spirits.
Yeah.
And how, demons can make themselves look like people you recognize. And I never thought of it that way. And it really helped me with the whole ghosts and paranormal, because I've maybe seen a demon once in my life, and it might have been my eyes playing a trick on me. I'm not 100% sure. So for me, whenever I'm around people who are very spiritually, they perceive things, I'm always like very interested in it, because I would love to like have a Joseph-like vision or something, but it's just one of those things that you're called into.
Well, here's something that I've also learned for me personally is if I see something or I feel something that has maybe a demonic tone to it, the first thing I do is I check myself. How am I doing? How's my mental state? How's my physical state? What's going on in my life? I check those things, because if you're depressed, have anxiety, you have anything like that going on, that's the enemy can get a foothold on that, and then that's how he can come in. So if I see something or hear something, the first thing I do, instead of recognizing that, is I check myself on where I'm at in life, what's happening. Have I allowed, do I have a crack in the door somewhere? What's happening? Because the enemy can't get to me unless I let him. So have I let my defenses down somewhere, and now he sees that crack and he's going to come in? So I try to check myself so it doesn't really, like if I see or hear, it doesn't bother me like what it used to. I used to get extremely startled and frightened, and could be terrifying.
Man, I can't. Yeah, that's a good perspective to have, though, to check yourself. Like, am I good? Like, what am I doing anything that I'm need to cut out, or is there anything that I'm allowing in my home? My parents were like just so on top of praying over the home, like all the time. Like I could remember them praying protection over our home and stuff, and that kind of stuff as the head of your house is so important, because the enemy wants any way to sneak in. And some demons, in the third world countries, they're a lot more prevalent in the way that the people will scream and they're almost more sophisticated in America, where people might have them on or in them, and you might not even realize it just from the outside looking in. They're a little bit more. They don't just make people thrash out on the floor all the time. I'm sure it still happens.
We could be desensitized to the demonic spiritual realm, because we're pumped full of it through TV and social media and stuff. So if you may not recognize it because you're seeing it anyway when you turn the TV on or the news or something like that. So a country that may not have the technology that we have readily available all the time, 24/7. I don't know. That's just something I just thought of. We can be desensitized and not recognize it.
It's a good point, because there's sometimes where I'll see videos of people doing discipleship, and the reactions of the people on the street, they're almost volatile. Like they almost like scream at you for even mentioning the name of Jesus. And I'm sure some of that is demonic without us even realizing it. We're touching on a little bit of being a single mother and how some of that was hard. Let's let's dive into a little bit more of some of the hardships and some of the rewards of what it was like being a single mom.
So let's start with the rewards, because Garrett and I have a pretty tight relationship, and we've always had a really close relationship. So some people may call it codependency. So, which we both have a handle on that now. You know, he's married and has kids, but you know, we were really tight and we were really close, and you know, I was so young when I had him, and you know, we went everywhere together and did everything together, and you know, baseball was such a huge part of our life. It was just, you know, it was just like me and him.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that I didn't date or, you know, I got married a couple times, but it was always me and him. It didn't matter what was happening in my personal life. Like I did my best to make sure he had everything. I don't know how he got spoiled because I was so broke, but I always made sure that he had everything that I could possibly give him. You know, it was hard. Childcare is rough. I listened to some stories, you know, about childcare and how expensive it is, and childcare, like, man, it's so tough.
Yeah.
You know, not only is it tough financially, but it can be tough if you don't, you know, sometimes you're just forced to leave your kids somewhere because they also have to eat. You know?
Right.
So, you know, there were a couple babysitters, I think, that just did not treat Garrett very nice. Of course, obviously, he didn't stay there when I found out, you know.
Yeah, but you're trusting, like, these people that you don't really, sometimes you don't know them, and it's like, you have no idea what you're putting your kid, what kind of situations you're putting your child in, and to wear that kind of stress along with the financial part of it, you know, that wears on you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I would always tell Garrett, you know, if you can wait till you're 30 to get married or have kids, or I really encourage that. And, you know, I'm so thankful that he was close to 30. You know, I think that was beneficial.
My dad was like 33, I think. Yeah. Or it's like, he might have been 33 when I was born. So he was in his 30s when he got married to my mom. Yeah. And stuff. And, you know, similar story to Garrett as he stepped into a relationship where there was already a child, so he stepped into the father role. My dad stepped into the father role with 2 immediately, and you know, there's no greater heart for a man than to like step into the fathership role like that, because that's a lot of responsibility, and you like loving, you know, your wife so much that you're willing to marry, you know, loving Leslie so much to be willing to marry her, and you know, accept that responsibility. That's a huge step.
That comes. I think that just comes naturally with him, because when he was young, he said several times that he was going to be a good father. And he is. Did
you ever put pressure on yourself or feel pressure from others to try to get married, to give him a father figure?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, yes. I've been married 3 times, and I can say that... like the second marriage for sure, like people would make comments that I wouldn't know a good man, and then they'd have a little something to say after that. So I was like, man, it's not hard to get married. Right. You know, it's not hard to find somebody to get married. But yeah, and it ended in disaster. You know, I've had 2 men try and kill me. So, man, I you know, if the option is being a single parent as opposed to death, then I think I'll take the single parent. Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot of pressure, you know, but, you know, I was dealing with a lot myself, trauma-wise, that I never talked about or anything, so.
Yeah, that's just so much you have to piece together for yourself. And then you're so right. It's easy to get married. It's hard to like make the relationship work.
I feel like Garrett and I have defied all the statistics. Statistically, we should not have made it. Statistically, you know, we shouldn't be in the positions we're in. Statistically, you know, it should have just went a whole other way. Yeah. And it's really only by the grace of God and God's hand on us and protecting us even when we weren't doing right that we're here today. You know, I've heard him say a couple times, you know, as with him being a father and 2 kids, and it's a two-parent household. Like, how did you do it as a single parent? I'm like, man, youth. That's the only thing that, because I was young, because I just
Yeah.
can't imagine I didn't have any sense. I just can't imagine being able to do it other than just the pure fact that I had more adrenaline and youth on my side.
Yeah. That grace is so, I mean, it can't be stated enough. Like, the amount of times we shouldn't have ended up where we are, but the
Yeah.
Lord, like, saw us through every season of us trying to do it our own way and whatever else
Yeah.
is thrown at
My
us.
way never works. My way has never worked. And the phrase I feel like the Holy Spirit has told me my whole life is, if you would just take your grubby hands off of it, just take your grubby hands off of it and let me do it. And for many years, I just fought him every step of the way, just I'm going to do it my way.
My way was leading me into a path of addiction and alcoholism that was going to ruin my
Yeah.
family. So I know what it's like to have, like, my way was no good way at all. Really surrendering that. It took some effort. Garrett was straight and narrow until he kind of like lost baseball.
Yeah.
And so,
He started to dabble a little
right,
bit.
he was starting to
but
juggle a little bit.
Yeah.
What was it like from the outside looking in? Because I'm sure he was like hiding some of that.
I was in pure denial. I was none the wiser.
Hmm.
I literally, honestly, not until about the last 2 years of his drug addiction, I really feel like I had no clue. Like, I knew, but I didn't know. And he would steal money from me, but just enough to where I would think I was crazy and misplaced it or miscounted, But I was in denial and I didn't recognize it. And of course, being a single parent, that's my kid, he would ask me every other day for $20 to get a haircut. I mean, the kid got 10 haircuts a week, but just either not recognizing it, not wanting to recognize it, not wanting. I enabled him quite a bit. Who wants to see their kid hurting? I think there was some codependency in there that had never been dealt with. I was dependent on him, and he was dependent on on me, and I'll never forget the defining moment that changed the direction, not for just my life, but his life, was this dog that he had that has been on probation. The dog had been tased by the police.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so Garrett needed a place for the dog to go. So we went to a kennel. I called a kennel, and this man answered, and he said, yeah, I'll take the dog. I'm like, look, the dog's mean, the dog bites. He's like, I'll take it. And we get there, and he saw right through Garrett. I didn't. He saw right through Garrett. And he walked up to me, and he put his hands on my shoulder, and he said, Mom, he goes, you can't love him out of this, but you can love him through it. And he told Garrett, if you ever decide to get clean, I will take your dog and keep it until you are completely clean, out of rehab. And he kept his promise.
Wow.
When Garrett went into Lifeline, he kept the dog for, 15 or 18 months and didn't charge him anything.
Wow. What was it like when you had this jarring moment? He's like telling you.
I feel like it snapped me back to reality. Because I had a job opportunity come up to where I could move, get transferred, and I took it. I transferred out of state, and once I transferred out of state, Garrett was here. He was on his own, and it was the hardest thing to do. Well, I cut him off financially. I just cut it off, and it was really hard to sit there knowing that your kid. Look, he used to live in his car right around from Faith Center with his dog.
Wow. What
Just
were the
literally
prayers
right
like?
around the corner from Faith Center.
That's crazy.
Yep.
What were the prayers like in that season when you're having to cut your son off, but you're trying to trust the Lord? What was your like?
Just help.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do? Just help. He could die in his drug addiction.
Yeah.
I attempted suicide while he was in his drug addiction because it was just stressful. That's part of his testimony. It's not the first time I'd tried that, but God had other plans. So
What drove you to that point?
just despair because, like I said, I've just had some abusive relationships and and now this is happening in my life, and just feeling alone, and that nobody cares and nobody's there, and
John just was on. He mentioned he's had thoughts. I've even had a guy on who had like 9 people commit suicide in his life, and he was about to attempt his own life. I've lost a friend to suicide.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that it's always the people you least expect, I feel like.
Yeah.
And, everyone's got a reason in that moment, but once you made it past that moment, what was the perception like afterwards?
I tell you, once I made it past the moment where I actually knew I was going to die,
yeah,
there was really complete peace, and I am not promoting anything, but I knew I was going. Like, I knew in that moment I had crossed that line and I may not come back. Like, I really honestly feel that, like, that was it.
Yeah.
But then I came back. I don't even know how I came back. I just woke up. Can't even tell you how many hours later,
It just shows you how far past you can get to where you can even go through with the whole, like, I'm crossing the line in the sand.
There's zero physical reason in the natural and the physical that I should be sitting here.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. Just
seeing how, whenever Garrett and them went to the ramp last time, they got a call that you had passed away, a different Debbie. Just seeing his, like yes. I saw him, it was probably like a week later, and it still looked like he was wearing it.
He couldn't talk to me for 3 days, literally.
Yeah.
The only thing he said to me was, I can't believe I thought you were dead.
Yeah.
I can't believe I thought you were dead. I was like, well, we probably really need to sit down and talk, about all of this, because it will happen,
Yeah.
and it just caught him so off guard. Well, it caught me off guard too.
Absolutely.
I didn't know I died either. It's like I did. And then I actually got a call from somebody else that was out to lunch with somebody, and they said, hey, do you know Debbie Hunt? And they're like, well, yeah, I know Debbie Hunt. And like, oh, well, they found her dead. And he was like, what? He's like, and they kept having this back and forth. Are you sure? And he's like, yeah, she does music. She goes to Ballard County, to that church down there to do music, which I have been going to a church in Ballard County.
Yeah.
And the only thing that he knew when the man said this, that it wasn't me, he's like, yeah, she's about 65. He's like, oh, that's not her.
Yeah.
And he called me, and you want to say those things you haven't said to your loved ones, like you want to say those. Yeah. So.
Even the preparation conversation of like, hey, like, I'm not going to be here forever. I was talking to my dad recently about it. His dad is like 92 or something. So, the end is imminent. Even if he lives another 6-8 years, he makes it to 100. That's that's nothing,
My goal is to live to be 120.
Nice. Yeah. I've heard of some people having that goal before. I think my dad has a goal similar to that, to live a long time. And my pawpaw, he's not very, spiritual. We're believing he's saved, but that's about as much as he's checked off on his walk with Christ.
That sounds like my dad. Yeah.
And so it's hard. My dad wants to talk to him about it, but like there's just no real conversation to be had there. And I'm watching my dad with his dad, and I'm thinking we were just talking and just casual conversation about 30 years from now. Like 30 years from now, my dad's going to be 90.
Yeah.
Like, golly, my dad had me a little bit older, not super old, but like just thinking like in 30 years, like I'm going to be super blessed if I have my dad.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like that is kind of a surreal thing that I hadn't really put a lot of thought into yet.
Yeah. My mom passed away in 2008. 2 years before Garrett graduated high school, and there was a point where I was looking at Garrett's graduation pictures. I was like, where's my mom at? And then I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
It's so hard to wrap my mind around that she was 65.
Wow.
I'm 52, and the thought of passing at 65, that's young.
Was it just health?
Yeah. She passed away from lung cancer. Yeah, it was, she had a pretty... traumatic childhood and controlling mother and found out in her later years that when her dad went to war, her mom dropped her off at an orphanage.
Wow.
And when her dad come back from the war, he was like, my mother's name was Bonnie, and he's like, well, where's Bonnie at? You know, he had no idea.
Wow.
My Aunt Phyllis, she'd been there a year. My Aunt Phyllis, nobody knew where she was, so she went and got her. And so it was a rebellion. My mother turned to cigarettes as a rebellion against her mom, because it was the one thing that she said she could have complete control over when it come to her mom. And in the end, it killed her.
Yeah, you know, that's
So don't do that.
that's one of the lies of the enemy. You can have
Lies.
control over this thing.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, that thing is it's a complete opposite, right?
Yeah.
But it's those kind of mindsets that he likes to implant in us. A little bit of pride, a little bit of hurt, and it'll go a long way if you like let that seed grow in your heart. You know, and cigarettes is one of those things, you know, I'm so glad Garrett brings it up every once in a while with the kids with vaping and stuff, because like nicotine is a real addiction.
It is.
Like these kids, like, and I know John will say it every once in a while to mention, you know, smoking cigarettes and stuff. And it's like, there probably should be a little bit more emphasis on that kind of stuff, because people will smoke those things till they have lung cancer and then still smoke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a real addiction.
I heard somebody do a teaching on, like, I don't know if I was mention names or not, so I don't want to like throw names.
Oh, that's whatever.
But Eric Ziegler did a teaching on acceptable sin. And I think it's one of those things that's acceptable. Like if you see somebody vaping or smoking a cigarette, it's acceptable, you know, even though it's going to kill them. So, you know, but you're going to put people in rehab if they're drinking or doing meth or something. And I've always like, we need rehab for people to quit smoking,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, we justify it.
Yeah, it's on you can get it anywhere. You know,
And
I remember buying them. Look, I'm from the generation that you could take a note
Oh, wow.
to the store
For your
from
mom?
your parent and
Wow.
buy cigarettes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like also you see people with like years of freedom from it have that one cigarette and then they're hooked
Yeah.
again. It's just like anything else. You have that. You can't just have a cigarette.
Right.
You know, if you have a cigarette, you're buying a carton the next day.
Yeah. Well, my mother, look, I was a strong-willed child. Matter of fact, she had to read the book, How to Raise a Strong-Willed Child. I was very, very strong-willed. And she thought she would use a little bit of reverse psychology on me and my brother, even, you know, if she smoked. So it was like, I want a cigarette, you know, like, that's cool. Let me have a cigarette. So she gave my brother a cigarette, and he took a puff on it, turned green, and threw up. I don't remember this because I was young, but she said, I took the cigarette, smoked the whole thing, and then asked for another one.
Oh, man.
So I feel like I tell everybody, man, I could have been a drinking, smoking floozy if it was not for my mother, you know. So.
Yeah. That's so funny. Well, was there music in your family growing up?
Yes, my dad played the guitar, and I started playing the piano at a really young age. How I got turned on to a piano was my parents had went to visit a friend. They had a piano, and they said they heard somebody playing the piano.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went to where the piano was, and I was there playing the piano. So my mom was like, well, we need to get her a piano. And my mom was really good at restoring furniture. So she had found an old upright, like the old ones, upright piano that somebody had painted pink. It was in a barn. There were bird nests in it. And she drug that home and redid the whole thing.
Wow, that's awesome.
I started playing the piano and got a couple scholarships to colleges to be a concert pianist and major in that kind of stuff. And I really didn't even start singing until I was about 16. So singing wasn't something I did, but playing the piano was something, you know, that was.
Did you feel like, well, I mean, you went to school for it. Did you feel like that's what you were going to do with your life?
I remember saying at like 5 years old that my dream at 5 was to move to New York and go to Juilliard.
Wow. And so through the years of having to take care of a family, did some of that kind of subside, or do you still have
It did when Garrett's dad and I divorced. I lost my piano. and I didn't touch one for 13 years.
What's it been like to like reignite that passion?
Well, I really feel like the Lord reignited that. The Lord has done a work. You mentioned performance earlier. You know, everything that I did musically was performance. You know, because you're performing these pieces. You know, so when I fully surrendered to the Lord, and then the door opened for me to like lead some worship at River City Mission, which is a tough crowd to.
Why is that?
It is a tough crowd. Well, it's just, there's a lot of oppression. That's not somewhere, River City Mission, that's not somewhere where those men want to be. They want a different life. They're trying. They're not knowing how to get out, and they want something different, and some of them don't know how to get that,
Yeah.
So one thing the Lord did was really change my mentality from a performance mentality to playing for him only. Because it wasn't performance because there was no reaction. So you can't perform, and there's no reaction. So the Lord really worked with me on that. And he's just continued to work. And I have a very clear, even though I was trained as a concert pianist and I played classical music, when it comes to worship, I have a very clear word from the Lord to keep it simple. Keep the playing simple. Keep the voice simple so he can come through, because the primary goal is for the Lord to come through, is for that, just like Garrett preaching, like singing and playing is your ministering to people. And that was just and I've really tried to stick with that, of just keeping my playing just very simple. Some people say, man, you play so good. And I'm like, well, I don't get it because I'm just playing some chords,
Yeah.
So just keeping it simple.
You used to play like Beethoven and Bach, and now you're
Mozart,
playing like
yeah.
CGD.
Yeah,
And you're like,
and growing up, like I could play like bass guitar, and I would play the big old upright bass and bluegrass music, and I could play a wind instrument if I wanted to. I can't because I get too lightheaded. But so I could play all kinds of different instruments. I don't now, but yeah, it's just I feel like I have a very clear word from the Lord to keep it just simple.
When you lost the piano for that season, did you feel like you lost a piece of yourself? Did you feel like you lost a little bit of your like heart of worship, so to speak? Or?
Yeah, I actually refused to even touch one. I was so emotionally scarred by not having it, because it was such a part of me. It's like it was like an extension of me. My mother used to say that she could always tell what kind of mood that I was in by whatever I was playing on the piano. So she would always want me to give everybody concerts. Everybody come over to the house. Hey, do you want to hear Debbie play the piano? And I'm like, I would get so angry. I was like, I don't want to play, like, but I explained it to her one day about how I felt whenever people would be like, we just need you to play, because it's so emotional. Like I couldn't do it without emotion. So I said, me playing the piano, now this is back then, and even sometimes today, me playing the piano for somebody, having to put that emotion into it, would be no different than you. Like I said, my mom was a writer. It'd be no different than you taking your diary that you write your private things in and reading it to people.
Wow. That's a great way to put it. I couldn't imagine, like, I don't know, I've kind of taken guitar for granted in some seasons of my life. Just, I've been passionate about things in my life, but never fully committed. Yeah. And guitar was the same, just like sports growing up. And so I've probably taken it for granted some, but now I couldn't imagine giving up.
Yeah.
You're like, you're right, it's an extension of yourself, You're picking up that instrument every day, and it's a blessing to even have the opportunity to play it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't consider myself like this great piano player, and I don't consider myself like this fantastic singer, but what I do know, everyone's like, well, you're just too hard on yourself. What I do know is the Lord will fill in those gaps as long as you are doing it for him. And I have witnessed this because I know what I'm capable of doing in the flesh. So I have witnessed the Lord taking whatever you're hearing and I'm hearing are two totally different things. And I just give it all. Just give it all to him, and you do. You know, I used to be terrified of messing up. Now I'm like, oh, I messed up. We need to start over.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I had somebody tell me before, they're like, we would never know you messed up if you didn't tell us. And I'm like, but, I think it's important that even in that scenario, when you're like leading worship, that you are still a real person. You know,
exactly.
I was at Ladies Living Free Saturday night and did the song Still Waters, which is based off Psalm 23. And the enemy did not want me to do that song. I could not get those chords right. The first couple, we started it over like 3 times, you know, but finally I was like, there's a reason that for some reason I could do this at home, but right now I'm struggling, and I know it was spiritual. I know there was a reason that I just can't see this E flat for some reason. I can't get it right when I've been getting it right. And it's because of what the song itself represents, and the enemy will just try and take anything. So I just took my time. I was like, I just need to play for a minute so we can just get this worked out and cast him to the side. So we can
I'm sure they
song.
really appreciate you being real and just say, hey, we're going to
so.
start.
I don't know what other way to be other
Unless
than that.
they're like snobs on music
No.
or something, surely. But, you know, you're being real with them. You know, you're putting yourself kind of like more down to earth. And, you know, I'm sure that they really appreciate some humility.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they've probably dealt with some stuck up people
Yeah.
who like look down on them going through rehab and stuff.
Well, you know, I've struggled a lot over the years with like not being on a worship team, because I was like, well, that's where, if you do music and you're in a church, that's what you're supposed to be on the worship team. And the Lord has really done a lot of work in me, and I've listened to what he's telling me is these small settings that I go into, the jail, the rehab. I've been out on the street with it at Barbecue on the River. Man, that's not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I don't even feel like it's a super small setting. I mean, how many people are you playing in front of at Ladies Living Free?
Between the clients and staff and us, like maybe 30, 35. More at the men's side, and probably about the same amount ish at the
What's
jail.
it been like getting to like branch out and go into the men's division? How's that been?
Well, that was just a prayer answered, because when I started at Ladies Living Free, I really didn't want to go to Ladies Living Free. You know, the Lord put it on my heart to branch out from River City Mission. And so I inquired about going to the men's side, and that door was closed for whatever reason. I don't even question it. But in that moment, I heard the Lord say, well, what about the ladies? And I'm like, the ladies aren't going to like me. I've not suffered from a drug addiction. Women, we can be real petty and catty. And I'm just like, I just had this picture of like this, the women not being receptive to me at all. So I sat on it for like 7 months, and I prayed about it. And then it just kept circling back around. And then I started having conversations with some staff members at Lifeline. And then we ended up going in August of last year. And it's been really great. And then I think that whole year was just preparation because the door was going to be open to go into the men's campus. I'm so thankful that we started with the women to prepare us to go into the men. You know, because then the Lord brought the laborers that wanted to go into the men's side.
Yeah.
You know, and he's brought the laborers that like going into the jail. And, you know, I had my first training meeting to be able to go into the prison over in Fredonia. And that was terrifying.
We have so many. I could imagine. That's terrifying. We have so many women in our church who are like starting ministries, like doing ministry work. You know, we need some more men to step up and do some ministry work. But, you know, with you and Debbie Cornwell, and, well, you know, I'm seeing it like, wow, there's like a lot of like ministry, you know, different visions, different things, but it's still really cool to get to see that.
Yeah.
You know, I know, you know, have you had like an opportunity in your ministry or in your day-to-day life to give advice to mothers who their children are either in addiction or like coming out of addiction?
As far as the addiction part, I've had, like, when Garrett was giving his testimony a lot, and I would go with him. Would have a lot of mothers that would come up to me like, what do you do? And the first thing I say is, for starters, this is not you. We all have choices, And then I tell them I share with them the biggest piece of advice that I got, which changed everything, was you can't fix it. You cannot fix this. I was driven into bankruptcy and almost lost my apartment. And, there's no amount of money you can give. There's nothing you can do. They have to want this for themselves.
Yeah.
And if you pull back and don't give them another dime, that's okay.
Yeah.
I was such an enabler, and now I can see it when other people are enabling. And man, it's tough though when you love your kids. But that's what I would say is, you didn't, even if you, did something and maybe they didn't have a really good childhood, at some point, they're accountable for their decisions. At some point, they have to be accountable.
Especially as a single mother, there's no father, there's no husband to help you be stern and firm. So you're probably going to be a little bit more like giving, like grace. I'm going to give. But even the advice you got, you can't love them out of it. You can only love them through it. And, where is there a fine line and how do you find that where you're like, okay, enough is enough. I have to draw the line and say, I love you, but me loving you isn't continuing to enable you.
Right. And, I was pretty hard on Garrett when he was growing up. You can ask him, I was, I had to be both the mother, and the father. Right. But mothers, we have a tendency to be more nurturing, and fathers are going to be like, clean your room and get over it, and I'm like, let me help you clean your room,
Right.
But, like I said, that defining moment is when I made the decision to understand that I could not fix him, is when everything changed for both of us. And it was, like I said, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, at some point, you just have to stop enabling. That's just how I feel about it. And me stopping enabling him is what set him on the path to where he is today.
Was there like a conversation?
No, there was no conversation.
I understand.
I got an opportunity. He helped me move. I tried to get him to stay in Texas with me when I moved to Texas, because he did come out there to help me move, and then I flew him back home. But the addiction would have come with him to Texas, because we weren't there but a couple hours, and the maintenance, I think the maintenance man, the apartment complex I moved into, was trying to sell him pot, so him moving to Texas wouldn't have helped him. Yeah. Me moving to Texas,
right,
is, I feel like was that boundary. And then me saying no to the money, not giving him any money. And that's tough when your kid messages you, and anybody who's ever been in addiction will know this phrase. And when I say it at Lifeline, they all laugh, of getting a text message of, just send me a pizza. Like, you don't even have an address. Like, you're in your car. Or am I supposed to send you a pizza? Yeah. So,
man, now that you guys are where you're at now, what are you looking forward to? Where do you feel like the Lord's leading you?
Looking forward to, for me, I'm just really looking forward to what the next thing is the Lord is doing, but it's not about where I'm going to be able to get to go to serve. It's really all about the relation. It's really all about the relationship. When I first started going into Ladies Living Free, I told the Lord, if you never have me do anything but go into the ladies' campus once a month for the rest of my life, I'll do it. For me, it's all about the growth and knowledge and revelation of who Christ is. And I had I used to think that when you reached a certain age in life, that everything was just smooth sailing. or if you reached a a certain age in life that you just knew everything.
You just
especially
figure
if
it out.
especially if you're a Christian, like I know I've heard all of this, I know all of this. But I had a rough couple days last week, and I finally, thank the Lord, got the full grasp revelation of Romans 8:1 that there is no condemnation in Christ. Because I have struggled with that, thinking it was depression and anxiety, and it was just like, I'm just going to show you really what this is. I watched a 2-hour teaching on it, and I tell you what, it set me free, because God doesn't condemn us. The Holy Spirit doesn't condemn us. The devil has no authority to condemn us, so our heart does, Well, you should have done it this way. You should have done it that way. And the Lord doesn't condemn you. And so I look forward more to those types of revelations.
Yes.
Because they come just out of the blue. It's not like, I know this revelation is coming. It's just like, boom, there it is. It's like, just blows your mind. Just when I think the Lord can't just blow my mind again, because this was so huge. He's like, well, watch this. I'm going to blow your mind on this. And I think that's what I look forward to. As a family, what I look forward to is Garrett, watching Garrett and Leslie and my grandchildren and what the Lord is doing in their lives, and just watching it all unfold.
Mm-hmm. Train of thought. Anyways, what's some advice that you would give to single mothers?
Single moms. Before we started recording, I made a joke, and I was like, don't do it. Single moms. You know what? Your children are a gift, and it's not their fault that a relationship or whatever didn't work out. They're brought into the world innocently. And I remember saying that about Garrett, that, man, I made the decision at 19 years old that, like, man, it's not his fault. Now it is no longer about me and what I want in life. In that moment for me, it was all about making sure that I raised this kid, right? But as single parents, man, there's one manual, that's the Bible. Yeah. But there's no manual on how to do it, and you just do your best. But if you're a single mom and you're struggling and you're not knowing what to do or how to do, if you're not in church, get in church. Get plugged into the church. Reach out to the women in the church. Reach out to the women in the church that may have been single parents and now can help you navigate that. And there's so many resources now today that are readily available that I didn't have back then, but I would, you're not alone, I think that would be one of the biggest things, is to recognize that you're doing the best that you can. And the enemy wants to isolate you. So, step out of that isolation and get plugged in somewhere with some sort of a support group that you can talk about these feelings. I used to say that I could really understand, like, there's a fine line between discipline and child abuse, when you've reached your limit, so I think that would be it. Get plugged in.
Like, whether you have a good support system, whether you have like parents who are really involved, or family, or you don't have a support system at all, getting in a church body, it always like leads to friendships. You might not find the support system you need tomorrow, but you can start to build one. Yeah. And people who can help you, people you can lean on, people who can show you some grace. Yep. So you can better show grace to your children, to where we don't get to that point of where we're at our wits' end, because there's times where you had to be at your wits' end and there was no help other than the Lord. Yeah. And you really had to rely on Him, but it's nice to have some people who can kind of come beside you and help you.
And don't look at the people in the church that are going to be your support system through rose-colored glasses. They are people too, and they're not going to be perfect. And somebody in life is going to fail you, whether it's going to be in a church, out of a church. But the church is a good place a good place to start. You know, they now have Celebrate Recovery, which is for anybody that's ever been through anything to get support and help, you know, not just drugs and alcohol, it's for anything.
The people or support, they're not supposed to be your foundation. The Lord
That's good.
has to be our foundation. The people help us, they support us, but like they should only help us strengthen our foundation. You know,
Right.
like but sometimes we do that. We put people on pedestals, we put the glasses on, and we don't see them as real people. Pastor John wasn't always Pastor John.
Right.
And you know, as Garrett continues on, Pastor Garrett wasn't gonna, you know,
Right.
he's still growing and he's still got like so much more, and his dedication is like unmatched. You know,
Yeah.
I love his passion for reading the Word and the effort he puts in, and you know, it's realizing like you're on the same playing field as them, but it's going to take discipline, it's going to take drive,
Yes.
and it's going to take pursuing Him to reach the level that they are. You know,
Yeah.
if you see them as spiritually more mature and, you know, your mentors, that's great. That's great. But you can reach that. You can
And it
achieve
takes
that.
and it takes work. And I've had this conversation. You know, there are some people that like they want the benefits of all the things that they see other people have, but aren't willing to put the work in. You have to put the work into yourself. You know, I've put a lot of work into myself the last couple of years with reading and talking. And, you know, there's a book that Pastor John gave me called At the Crossroads, and I just cried through the whole thing, you know, and it just made so much sense. I'm like, this is why I am the way I am, you know, and, but you have to put that work in. If you need to go to therapy, go to therapy. If you need to meet with your pastors or elders, meet with them. Like you have to, there's not a magic pill you can take and then one day you're going to wake up and then I've made all this progress in the Lord and have not put any work in. It's just not going to work that way, because the Lord will keep revealing to you as you press into Him. He will keep revealing to you things about yourself that you didn't even know. Just like the other day, revealing to me, you know, what condemnation really was to me. So, you know, that takes work, and it takes effort, and it takes persistence to do that. But you'll reap the benefit.
Right. You know, Pastor Jeff, some of the best advice he's ever given me, it's simple advice, but you have to apply it to, you know, the Bible talks about not applying stuff to your life, just hearing it and then not applying it. It's a very dangerous game. I was thinking about this today when I was delivering mail, and I forgot about it till now, but like, if you listen and you don't obey, you know, that's a dangerous sin. Not that it's any worse than any other sin. It's a dangerous sin, though, because it leads you into the heart of just being okay with sinning.
Yeah.
So when you hear things and you obey them and you start applying them to your life, that's whenever you're going to start feeling a change and shift in your heart.
Yeah.
But some of the most simple advice he's given me that's really been profound and something that I'm trying to truly apply like every single day is set healthy boundaries. Not just with people, but even in my own, like in myself, because like, you know, with former addiction, like setting boundaries, I had to give, I couldn't keep cash on me. I had to get rid of my credit card. I had to do things to prevent me from drinking. Jody left town and I was like a month sober, or maybe a little bit more sober. The second time I've gotten sober, and I had a Hershey or a Tootsie Roll container full of quarters, and I counted out $7 of quarters, and I let it burn in my pocket for like an hour. I was you know, pacing my house, but I was able to defeat that attack. But I had to put boundaries in place. And another thing he said is find your rhythm of life, you know, find your rhythm of life, your daily disciplines, you know, his is like waking up and working out, like doing his running and spending time with the Lord. Like I can get real lazy and want to sleep in, or real lazy and want to stay up and not give time to the Lord. But if you don't find a rhythm where you're putting the Lord in your rhythm, you're going to drift away.
Yeah.
You know, something that I've even just now recently been doing is listening to the Word whenever I'm delivering mail. Well, there's times when my flesh kicks in and I want to not listen to that. I want to listen to what Daniel wants to listen to. Well, if I'm struggling to fit God in after work and I'm not giving Him the time at work, it's like I'm using an excuse to give Him no time at all.
Right.
So, like, being disciplined, putting that worship on today, so I could prepare myself for tonight. You know, putting myself in that mentality every day, even if I'm not doing the podcast, to give him his time, to give him his space to where I can grow. It's like so important.
And your time with the Lord doesn't have to look like everybody else's. And I think I've struggled with that. You know, some people, I pray 4 hours out of the morning, and I'm just like, but you have to be at work at 8, you know, and it's, you know, so it doesn't, your time with the Lord is your time with the Lord that, like Jeff says, fits with the rhythm of your life. You know, I have a morning rhythm. I call it my coffee pot shuffle in the morning. But, you know, without that rhythm in the morning of the coffee and the reading and some praying and writing in my prayer journal or whatever, it looks different every morning. Without that time in the morning, it like messes up my whole day. That, for me, that's my time to be able to be with him fully in the morning. And then I still am in the evening, you know, and throughout the day, but like that intentional me and you, mine is more in the morning, but it could be different for everybody. And there's no condemnation if yours does not look like somebody else's. It has to look like yours. It's your relationship with the Lord.
So I go back to the key. You know, every key is going to be a little different for each lock. Your lock, someone might have some ideas to help shape and mold you, to give you, you know, certain things someone does might apply and work really well with you, and some things just won't. And praying and seeking the Holy Spirit, like what are some things I can do to have some change in my life? Because once you get healthy boundaries, healthy lifestyles, the things that you were struggling with, you don't want to do them as much anymore. You know, getting myself healthy out of addiction took me getting used to this new lifestyle, renewing my mind, you know,
well, not in the flesh. I mean, like people do drugs and alcohol because it makes them, you know, makes you feel good. Right. So that's hard to give up. Yeah.
It's, you just, I think about it, and I hear other people tell their stories on why they do it or what the driving force is. And me and Pastor Jeff have talked about, you know, trying to figure that out for me. He thinks all of it comes from some kind of hurt that people haven't dealt with. And part of me thinks part of it was just me wanting to do it.
Yeah.
A huge driving force of it was just that pure, like, want to. You know, and some people are completely set free, like lickety split, like Garrett, once he was delivered, you know, no relapses. And
he was delivered from smoking.
Right.
You know, because he vaped and whatnot, and he was completely delivered from that.
Yeah, I didn't really smoke cigarettes, but I dipped. I have smoked cigarettes. I've vaped. I've done all the nicotine goes hand in hand with any extracurricular, because like if you're getting high or you're drinking, that buzz from the nicotine is always like a little bit more enhanced. And that one wasn't as hard because I feel like the vaping specifically was like the most addictive for me. So once I was able to give that up, the dipping wasn't as hard because it wasn't like, I don't know, it was just a different kind of like urge. That vape has like so much more concentrated nicotine where I was like really driven. But
plus they don't really even smell like cigarettes. They smell like cotton candy.
Yeah. So, and there's something cool as a guy. Where do you see like a cloud of like you're some kind of fireman? Yeah. So silly. So silly. I'm so glad. You know, that's just I feel like that's one of those things that that's an addiction where it's immediate. It's a burning sensation. It's not quite like any other addiction I've ever faced where the impression it leaves on you when you want that cigarette, it's like, I gotta have it kind of thing. But if you can beat that urge, then it usually subsides. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's 72 hours, and I think that nicotine is completely out of your body. So in 72 hours, you have no nicotine in your body. So after that, and it's not in your system, you know, then it can be a choice, a habit, you know, because now you have this arm motion memory, muscle memory,
it's the habit,
you know. So
absolutely, You got anything else you want to share with the people?
I don't know. I feel like I've bounced around all over the place. So
Yeah, that's all good. That's kind of like how we've been doing it lately. I've been kind of, you know, when I first started, I was always like starting with the beginning, like what was church life like for you, and like go through people's like meticulously go through people's life. And there's time and place for that, but I also feel like it's cool to just get to just talk to people and then kind of dive into the topic as it presents itself.
Yeah.
I've been preparing questions, which is new for me. So I feel like the Lord's just growing the way I do this. And I think it's good to kind of jump around and kind of mold it back into like your story, because all those little things make up who you are today.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. I felt all over the place with Sarah last week too. And I got to a little bit more time to prepare for our conversation because I had like a whole week of, and maybe even a little bit longer of knowing we were going to do it. So I don't know. I just feel like it's just about having a good conversation about what Jesus has done.
I think God's timing is perfect too, because for the last year I've had people tell me like, when are you going to be on Daniel's podcast? I'm like, man, you know, I just really feel like, Virginia, and maybe your wife a little bit. But I kept saying, I need to know that the Lord has told me it's time to do the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I really don't ever want to do anything in the flesh. I don't want to be like, I did Daniel's podcast. You know, look at me. Ooh, no, I want to do it when I know that the Lord's like, hey, you know, let's do this. You know, so I feel like, I don't know what will come of this, but I feel like this was the time. And then Jody reassured me that, you know, I can come on again sometime, you know.
Absolutely.
So, you know.
I just feel like, you know, I'm so in this, like, passionate about it. I used to feel like I don't put pressure on people anymore to come on. Like, I'll invite you and then I'll let it be, because at first I used to get anxious and nervous, or why don't people want to come on? Like, why don't people? And I've even had conversations with my dad on here, and I've changed my perspective on it, because like, you should pray about it. Mm-hmm. Just like I'm praying about who I should have on. When I invite people, they should feel confident that the Lord's leading them to it. I shouldn't just expect them to want to come on here. So I've just gotten to a place of where I'm really at peace with understanding, like, if someone doesn't want to come on it, they've got their time to come on. And in the meantime, the Lord will provide a guest, or I'll just get on here and talk for 30 minutes by myself, like whatever.
Yeah. And, you know, a year ago, I may not have been able to. A year ago, it wasn't called Acts in Action. Like a year ago, I may not have been able to articulate anything that's happening within the ministry, because it was so new and I really didn't even know what was happening with it. So,
yeah. And, you know, even me sharing my testimony was like, I had like a month of sobriety at the time. I had this huge downfall in my mind. I fell flat on my face. And the Lord was putting it on my heart almost immediately after getting clean the second time. You need to share your testimony. I mean, I was at the, I don't know, the apex of that feeling of like unworthiness. But the Lord is truly always like growing our testimony. So I love that you got to come on, you know, a little bit after a year of doing Acts in Action, and you can come on again and share more stories of what the Lord's been doing in the lives of the people. You know, getting to hear that people are getting to praise beside you now. That's so cool. That's so awesome. Yeah. You know, it's really
several
awesome.
of them that have, you know, been released from the jail, and one girl came from Ballard County and is phasing up to phase 3 at Lifeline, and I'm just blown away. I saw one girl that at the Rock and Recovery event, that when she first got released, she took off and ended up back in jail, and now she seems to be doing really well. And so it's just really,
a lot of those people end up going back over and over and over again. They might not serve like years, but they might serve like a month here or a month. A lot of those people. So getting to those people and getting them somewhere steady, because they might not do a Lifeline. They might want to, you know, Lifeline might not be for everybody.
Right.
And, you know.
Well, they have limited beds too, so it can't be for everybody.
Yeah, it's they probably have like a sheet full of people that they can't even, you know, get to yet. But yeah, I think it's awesome. I'm so glad for what you do and, you know, what you mean to my wife and stuff.
I love her.
We greatly appreciate you and love you. So
Well, I love
thank
you
you.
guys. You're
Thank you for
welcome.
coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I'll talk to y'all next time.